It's been a busy offseason so far for the Orioles, but they are nowhere close to done. Now showing interest in a left-handed reliever. We'll talk about JoJo Romero in the reliever trade market coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, December 22nd, 2025, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to talk about some more Orioles reported trade interest after they made the big move on Friday to acquire starting pitcher Shane Baz from the Tampa Bay Rays. The interest continues on the trade market, this time for a reliever in Cardinals left-hander JoJo Romero. We'll talk about who Romero is and how he could fit for the Orioles. And plus, we've already talked a little bit about how much I think the Orioles do need one more left-handed reliever, but is trading for one really the smartest way to do it? And is there anyone out there that's worth it besides Romero? We'll chat about all that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So the trade and free agency rumors continue for the Orioles this offseason as we approach the end of 2025, as the O's have been busy. Leody Taveras, Taylor Ward, Ryan Helsley, Pete Alonso, and Shane Baz, and actually Andrew Kittredge as well, have all been added to this roster to help the big league team in 2026, and they are not done because Mike Elias, after making the big Shane Baz trade on Friday, if you haven't gone back and listen to my Friday evening episode, make sure to do that to break down everything you need to know from that Baz trade. We're going to have another episode coming up later this week to go a little more in depth about what Shane Baz brings to the Orioles. But Mike Elias, did a Zoom with the media on, I believe, Saturday morning after the trade was finalized on Friday night. And he talked about how the fact that the Orioles aren't done. And Ken Rosenthal at The Athletic reported on Friday that the Orioles aren't done. They're still looking for another starting pitcher. They're still looking for at least another reliever and, some sort of bench bat, versatile utility kind of major league bat to add to this roster as well. Like, they are still looking to upgrade this team. They're better than they were 2 months ago, but it's still not enough to make me feel like this team is a legitimate championship contender. Now they add another pitcher and another reliever. Now we're starting to talk. So speaking of those relievers, they have some reported interest in another one. They've already signed Ryan Helsley to be their closer. They've reacquired Andrew Kittredge in a trade to be one of their setup men. But it feels like the lefties in the bullpen are lacking just maybe a little bit, right? With Keegan Aiken, Dietrich Enns, Grant Wolfram is the top three of lefties. And if the opening day was tomorrow, there's no guarantee that all three of those would even make the team. Like, I could totally see Wolfram beginning the year in AAA and Aiken and Enns making the team because they are out of options. But I think the Orioles bullpen gets a lot better if they add a lefty type setup man. And that guy could be St. Louis Cardinals left-hander JoJo Romero. As Derek Gould, who's one of the top Cardinals reporters over at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, reported on Friday that we've kind of known that the Cardinals were willing to trade Romero, but he did report specific interest by the Orioles in talks with the Cardinals, potentially on a Romero trade. Now, who is JoJo Romero? He is a left-handed relief pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's 29 years old, and he is coming up on his final year before free agency. He is projected to make about $4.4 million by MLB trade rumors in arbitration for 2026. That is his final RB year, and he will be a free agent after the 2026 season. The Cardinals aren't into full rebuild, but Chaim Bloom has kind of fully taken over that front office. They're kind of in soft selling mode this offseason. I think that, they've already traded Sonny Gray. I think they're definitely going to deal Romero, and they're willing to talk about guys like Nolan Arenado, and it seems like Wilson Contreras as well, to get a little bit younger and infuse a little more talent into that team. And they probably won't be great in 2026, but I think in the hopes of being a postseason team again in 2027. So that means any guys who are free agents after this year are certainly going to be up for grabs, and that's why Romero is almost definitely at this point on the trade block. Now, JoJo Romero, going back, he was a fourth-round pick of the Philadelphia Phillies out of college back in 2016, and debuted with Philly in the shortened 2020 season in the major leagues, but it was kind of a short run there. He got Tommy John surgery in May of 2021, of course, missed the remainder of that season and part of 2022, did return in 22 only to be traded by the Phillies to the Cardinals at the 2022 deadline for Edmundo Sosa. Of course, that was the Phillies team that ended up going to the World Series before losing to the Houston Astros, but Romero already had found himself in St. Louis, but he really hadn't gotten much of a shot with the Phillies even after debuting. The Cardinals gave him a real shot in the bullpen and turned him into a pretty good left-handed reliever. Since August 20th of 2022, that was when Romero pitched his first game for the St. Louis Cardinals. He has a 3.00 ERA with a 3.5 FIP in 171 innings with a 23% strikeout rate to a 9% walk rate. Pretty good numbers. That is the 10th lowest ERA among left-handed relievers in Major League Baseball since August of 2022, among guys who have thrown at least 150 innings in that stretch. Those are guys who you're generally relying on in each of those seasons. Now, he did begin 2023 in AAA with the Cardinals, but they finally did call him up, and then it was just go time. Had an awesome, last couple of months of 23, was in the opening day bullpen in 2024, and, the last 2 years, 24 and 25, he's combined for a 2.70 ERA, and has really been the Cardinals' number one lefty in that stretch and kind of had his breakout season, I would say, this year. Now, if you look under the hood, you could argue that 2025 was not his overall most dominant season. I think his most dominant stuff came in stretches in 2023. But when you pitch in 65 games for the second straight year, throw 61 innings, and post a 2.07 ERA, which is what Romero did this season, those are pretty good numbers. It was a 3.28 FIP, so there was definitely some good luck involved. He's a good ground ball pitcher. It's up towards 57%. Strikeout rate, 22%. Walk rate really jumped from 7% in 2024 to 11% this year. That was probably the most concerning thing that happened for Romero, but he was able to kind of work around a lot of those walks this season to still post a 2 ERA. And that 2.07 ERA, that was the third best ERA among big league left-handed relievers this year who threw at least 50 innings. So kind of the main lefty relievers across the league, only two of them had a better ERA than Romero. Now, the last couple of years, he has not found the big-time strikeout stuff he flashed in that really good run at the end of 2023 with the Cardinals. And as I mentioned, the walks did spike a little bit this year, but it's a super high ground ball rate. It's very low hard hit rates against him. He just got to get himself back inside the strike zone a little bit more. And you could say, Connor, you really expect him to be better than a 2.07 ERA? Well, I think if he doesn't change anything, he's going to regress because there was some good luck baked into his season. If he can change and throw more strikes, he could have an ERA in the twos and have it look more legitimate under the hood as well, which, if the Orioles are only getting him for one season, does that matter that much? Maybe not. But if this is a guy you want to trade for and you want to maybe extend him for a couple more years, that's when it becomes more of an important thing. His mix is mostly slider, sinker, changeup is what Romero throws. The slider is his number one pitch. He throws it 38% of the time. Good swing and miss rates, about a 180 batting average against it. It's got really extraordinary horizontal break for a guy who throws from his arm slot. He's actually kind of changed himself as a pitcher since he got that Tommy John surgery in 2021. Pre-surgery that year, he had a 43-degree arm angle. This season, he was at a 31-degree arm angle. That is a big change, going from a lot more over the top to a lot more sidearm in just those 4 years. Stuff Plus likes his sinker. It got hit a little harder than usual this year, but it's still a go-to pitch that he can throw for strikes, averages about 94 miles an hour on the sinker for Romero. Then he's got that slider at 83 and the changeup at 87. When he faces righties, he's going to throw mostly changeups and then mix in the sinker and the slider. Against lefties, he's predominantly just a sinker slider pitch. He didn't throw a single changeup to a left-handed hitter this season. He is better against lefties, but it's not a crazy split where you can't let him face righties. He can get righties out too, because that changeup is pretty good. And that allows him to not just be a lefty specialist, but to be more of a true setup man. Righties hit only 167 against that changeup this year. That gives him a weapon. Now, not exactly sure what his trade market looks like as a good relief pitcher, but a rental. Again, this is a guy you're trading for, and unless you extend him, he's only going to be in your bullpen for 1 year until he hits free agency. Is it really worth it to trade for rental relievers? Of course, it happens at every single trade deadline. Teams acquire, 2 months of a reliever to bolster their bullpen, but that looks a little different because you're trying to fill holes on your team, and it usually doesn't cost a whole lot. When you're trading for a guy in the offseason, the Cardinals don't have to trade JoJo Romero. They could hold him until the deadline and then trade him then and try and up his value even more and have teams be more desperate. I tried to look around and see, what it could cost. I mean, the Orioles would clearly take on all of the $4 million he'd be paid. The closest thing I found is maybe Taylor Rogers, another lefty reliever who was traded last offseason, who also had 1 year remaining on his deal. Now, he was 5 years older than Romero and a little more established. He also was going to make $11 million instead of $4 million in that final year. So that's a different trade calculus. That's, almost triple the money that he's making, and 5 years older. It looks very different. But he was coming off a very similar season for the Giants, 60 innings pitched and a 2.4 ERA. And Rogers was traded to the Reds for AA relief prospect Braxton Roxby, who was a 35-plus future value at FanGraphs. Good FIP, good strikeout numbers as a 25-year-old in AA before the trade. So to me, like Alex Pham, who's an Orioles pitching prospect who's made it to AAA, 25 years old, is a very, very similar prospect to Braxton Roxby. I would say because Romero is much younger and much cheaper than Rogers was, he would probably be more expensive in a trade. So you're looking at something, I came up with a couple more names like a Kiefer Lord or a Zach Fruit, maybe two of those three names along with Alex Pham you'd package together, and the Cardinals would be willing to do that to make a deal for a guy like JoJo Romero. But really the question is, when you get to that point, is like, okay, if you're giving up two pitching prospects, and especially a guy like Zach Fruit, who's got really good stuff that could be helpful to your major league bullpen by even next year, like, are those guys worth it for 1 year of a left-handed reliever in a trade? That's what I wanted to talk about next. Like, is it worth it to trade for relievers at this point? Are there other guys that are more worth it out there for the Orioles that could be lefties that help this pen? That's up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, listen, I'm recording here on an NFL Sunday, and they move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, and every highlight moment. And live betting is really the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. Well, either way, FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long at FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. So we're talking about the Orioles' reported interest in Cardinals left-handed reliever JoJo Romero, who would be a free agent after 2026. And that's kind of where this conversation takes us next. Because, like, I guess let's start with, are there other options out there, right? Again, I believe with the current state of the lefties in the bullpen, Keegan Akin, Dietrich Enns, Grant Wolfram, those are the top guys right now. Josh Walker, who they've claimed a couple of times off waivers, he was DFA'd again on Friday. That was to make room for the Shane Baz trade, so Baz could be added to the 40-man roster. So Walker is back in the, kind of DFA limbo ether for the Orioles. I don't think he was going to be the number one choice to make the team anyway. He was kind of there for more potential relief depth, but none of those guys scream high leverage guy. And I know Dietrich Enns certainly showed some of that last year, and maybe he could do that moving forward. The Orioles decided to keep him around. We know Keegan Akin's been good in low leverage, but when he got in those high leverage spots last year, that was rough. I'm a big believer in Grant Wolfram, but I want to see him prove it a little bit more. So you don't have, the prime Cionel Perez or the really good Gregory Soto. Neither of those guys are on this team right now. They are gone. You don't have the really good Danny Coulomb. Now, Danny Coulomb is still a free agent, so a reunion is possible, but those three guys who have really filled that role of the high leverage lefty for the last 3 seasons for the Orioles are just not on this roster right now. And I think they're lacking that. And after getting Kittredge and Helsley, the bullpen feels a lot better, but I feel like it could use one more lefty. Now, really there had been, I would say JoJo Romero has been the biggest lefty reliever kind of rumored in trade this offseason, but a lot of them have kind of been dealt already. Jose Ferrer, kind of out of nowhere, went from the Nats to the Mariners in the Harry Ford trade. Mason Montgomery was moved in the Rays' other deal with the Pirates and the Astros, the three-team trade they also made on Friday. Kyle Backus, interesting lefty, went from the D-backs to the Phillies over the weekend. The Phillies traded away Matt Strahm to the Royals. That's somebody I really would have been interested in for the Orioles to get a lefty reliever, but he goes to Kansas City. And speaking of Kansas City, Angel Zerpa, lefty with really good stuff, was moved from the Royals to the Brewers in a trade earlier this year. So there's been lefty relievers that have been dealt. The big difference is, Strahm is the only one of all those guys who is a rental with 1 year left. All those other guys have at least 2 years of control, and most of them more than 2 years of control. And that's why teams were going after them, because A, you like the stuff, you have a lefty who you think you can help, but B, it's like, we're not just banking on him for 1 year and giving up stuff for 1 year of a reliever when they're so volatile. If we have a guy for, 3 years of team control, it's okay if one of those in there is not so good. If the other two are, that feels like a win, especially when relievers can just be so up and down and pretty unpredictable. So there's probably a couple more guys out there you could target, like Yuki Matsui of the Padres, 30-year-old, has 2 years left on his contract, but also has a $7 million player option for 2028, so it could be 3 years left. He's been solid for San Diego the past 2 years since coming over from Japan, but the walks went up this year. The FIP skyrocketed to 4.87 in 2025. I'm not really sold on Yuki Matsui. I've always been a huge fan of Wandy Peralta, 34-year-old lefty. He has a $4.5 million player option for 2027. So there's a chance he could have 2 years remaining before he's a free agent. Had a sneaky good year, 60% ground ball rate, 3.14 ERA, and 71 innings for the Padres this season. But a lot of them in low or medium leverage. He certainly wasn't the top lefty used for the Padres. They would use Matsui, or more likely they would use Adrian Morejon as their number one lefty. So Peralta would either be number 2 or number 3. So I don't know if you trust him in the high leverage, but it's something he's done in the past. Like back when he was with the Yankees and the Orioles saw him a lot, he was in a much more high leverage role than he's been in San Diego in the past couple of years. And he's a different pitcher now that he's older, but I've really always liked Wandy Peralta. I'd be down for doing a deal like that. With Matsui and Peralta, the Padres are trying to find any way to move some salary and make this giant paid roster make sense. And all those guys don't take up big chunks, it would certainly be helpful. And the Padres might move those guys for basically nothing, right? If the Orioles were willing to just take on the full salaries of either a Matsui or a Peralta, they barely have to give up anything prospect-wise. And those could be two guys where maybe you do target it, where it's like, yeah, if we want to pay whatever Peralta's going to make this year, the Padres will just kind of let us have him so they can clear, the 5-6 million or whatever it is off the books. They might just say, go for it. And maybe that's something where the Orioles could get involved. It's certainly a possibility on something like that. And then there was the guys where it's like tons of team control. Could they get moved for the right price? I'm thinking a guy like a Jose Ferrer or an Angel Zerpa. We've seen guys like Tanner Banks, for example, get moved in this scenario over the past couple of years. I was looking at Andrew Nardi, 27-year-old lefty reliever for the Marlins. He's a free agent after 2028, so he's got 3 years of team control left. Had an awesome year in 2023 when the Marlins made the playoffs. Then his ERA, it was 2.67 that year. It ballooned to 5.07 in 2024, despite the fact that he had a better strikeout rate, a lower walk rate, and a lower FIP. He was like the king of unlucky relievers in 2024. So he was seen as a big-time bounce-back candidate in 25. And then he missed the entirety of this season. There was a little bit of an elbow issue, but it was mostly a back injury that kept him out for the entire year, which you don't love to see. Now, people thought because of that, the Marlins were going to just non-tender him. They still decided to tender him a contract, so he is still on the Marlins 40-man roster, and he's still, I think, looking like the top lefty on their team right now. Maybe he's a guy you could buy low coming off the injury, and if he shows the flashes he showed those 2 years pre-back injury, that could be a really good, cheap, controllable lefty reliever. And the other one to mention, this is just a guy that I'm like more personally fond of as a pitcher. I don't know exactly how good he's going to be, but he did go to College of Charleston, so shout out to the Cougs. That is Evan Sisk, who had been with St. Louis and Minnesota and Kansas City in the minor leagues, and he finally debuted with the Royals this year in the big leagues, pitched in 5 games, and the strikeout stuff looked really good. They sent him over to the Pirates around the deadline, and then he pitched for Pittsburgh the rest of the year. 4.38 ERA, a small sample size, 12 1/3 innings. He struck out 14. He walked 5. He gave up a home run, but It's a guy who creates a lot of ground balls. He is already 28 and he will be 29 in April, so he's a little bit older, but he's got like 5 years of team control remaining, I believe. He still has 2 minor league option years, which gives you flexibility with Sisk as well. It is a very, very funky kind of sidearmy delivery from the left-hander in Sisk. The stuff is quite intriguing for him. I mean, he struck out 25 batters in 17 and 2/3 innings this season as a reliever between the Royals and the Pirates. Now, would this be a guy who you'd just throw into your top lefty spot? No, he'd fall into the category of Enns and Wolfram, where it's like, we'll see what he's got. But the baseball savant sliders look awesome. Yeah, he only throws 90 miles an hour, but that's not what it's about. The pitch has crazy sink on it. He throws this 80-mile-per-hour sweeper, which basically nobody can touch. He's kind of Danny Coulomb-like in that he also, though he throws soft, he throws 5, and if you count a different slider that he threw a couple of times, arguably 6 different pitches. Like, he's a Danny Coulomb type guy that, hey, you go to Pittsburgh and you say, hey, you want a potentially interesting bat that could help you? I'm not saying you do Kobe Mayo for Evan Sisk, but maybe there's a AA or AAA hitter that the Pirates really like, and you can go and get Sisk, and he can help your bullpen for years to come. Those are the kind of moves out there that could also be made if the Orioles do want to go the trade route. But I guess the big question is, like, is it worth it to go the trade route for a reliever? I think it's more worth it when you're getting those guys with 4 or 5 years of control and you can really have time to mold them. But if you're getting someone for 1 year, like, is that worth it for the point the Orioles are in their team building? Let's try to break that down a little bit to finish off the show. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. In the midst of basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The crowd, the energy, the moments you can't get watching from the couch. The only problem is getting tickets used to be a hassle with long queues, logins, and prices changing at checkout. Well, that's why Game Time is such a game changer. It puts the advantage back in the fans' hands and makes scoring great NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I can pull up the Game Time app to check out any upcoming Wizards games in the area, even 76ers games as well, and can find great seats in just a few taps. And the best part about Game Time is knowing the price includes all fees up front to make the whole experience way less stressful. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So the Orioles are reportedly interested in Cardinals left-hander reliever JoJo Romero, and I guess the question is it worth it to trade for a reliever instead of just sign one? We'll get to that in a moment, but first I want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Now, we know a lot of you out there already live the Orioles. You live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. You can join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Orioles with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month, or, to save a little money, $50 per year. Just go to lockedonorioles.supercast.com or check the links down in the show notes to learn more. We already got some fun conversation going on in the Discord. You get those ad-free episodes as well if you want to check out the Everydayer Club. So is it worth it for the Orioles to make a trade like this? Like, JoJo Romero is very good. I think he would help the team. He would make the Orioles bullpen certainly better, and he would give you a lefty setup, high leverage type reliever. All things that the Orioles should still be looking for this offseason. But you also question, like, he costs prospects, right? He's probably better than any of the free agents who are left. So I think it would be worth it if they did try and trade for Romero. But beyond JoJo Romero, you can just pay the money and get a 1-year reliever and save the prospects. And it's not like these guys are going to cost an arm and a leg. Like, you're not going to find anybody out there who's going to cost you more than at most $10 million for 1 year. It's probably going to be more like $6 to $8 million that you're going to go and get this guy and still have an impact lefty reliever. Like, the guys who are still on my lefty reliever wish list who are out there, Justin Wilson, Connor Newcomb, Danny Coulomb, a guy we already mentioned, and Taylor Rogers is also still a free agent as well. Like, all 4 of those guys you could sign for a pretty cheap 1-year deal and immediately would make the Orioles bullpen better. Now, maybe Sean Newcomb, no relation, gets 2 years because he could be a starter and he then had a nice breakout when he went to the A's last year. But I mean, if a reliever is close to free agency like Romero is, and he's not as good as Romero, shouldn't you just pay the money? Right? Especially when you have David Rubenstein saying there's no, financial ceiling for us this offseason. Just pay the money and save the prospects. You just traded away 5 potential prospects to the Rays for Shane Baz. I think the Orioles will get a 1-year stopgap as a lefty reliever. I trust them to get one, whether it is Romero or, whether it is identifying the right free agent. This is something that, if we're being honest, Elias has been pretty good at. Really, his only true miss was Michael Givens. Obviously, you're going to say Craig Kimbrell was a miss, but he was great in the first half, and then the age and the Kimbrell of it just had him fall apart in the second half. But I wouldn't call it a horrible miss because he was helpful to the Orioles for 3 months. Now, I'm not saying the Kimbrell move was good, but it wasn't a disaster the Michael Givens one was. Otherwise, like when he has found relievers to go and get, it's generally worked out. Like Dominguez was good. Soto was good in terms of guys they've traded for. I mean, Kittredge was good enough to get traded and then get him back on this team. Finding Danny Coulomb was incredible. And then the way he's built the rest of these bullpens, finding Brian Baker and Cionel Perez and Joey Crable on waivers and getting Coulomb, as I mentioned, and developing Felix Bautista and getting Yennier Cano thrown in on that trade and, turning Keegan Aiken into a solid reliever and all the things they've done to build this bullpen. I trust that with the way they kind of blew up the bullpen last year, they'll be able to rebuild it. It's going to be some of the guys who got a real chance in the second half last year, the Rico Garcias and the Grant Wolframs, and the Dietrich Enzes and the Yarmil Geraldos of the world. Like these guys are going to get a shot to at least compete for a spot in the pen, and some of them are going to get an opening day shot. But you can also go find another guy like a Danny Coulomb, I think, who is out there that I haven't even talked about anywhere. And you can always get rental relievers at the deadline. The Orioles are going to do it pretty much every year. They're good. They're cheap. They don't cost a lot. They help you for 2 months, and they fill the need at the moment. But in the offseason, I think I'd rather go after those kind of under-the-radar guys with multiple years of control. And yes, I'd be fine with Romero because he's kind of proven that he's good. But relievers are just so volatile, right? If JoJo Romero came out there and had a 4.3 ERA this season, I mean, it would be surprising, but not shocking at all, just the way that even good relievers like Romero go up and down from year to year. And if you're trading prospect capital for relievers, that's always the risk you're taking. But if you're getting someone like the Mariners did with Ferrer or the Brewers did with Zerpa, who has really, really good stuff and has, 3 or 4 plus years of team control, and you can do more development, have it be a long-term project. You know, there's probably going to be one bad year built in there, but maybe a rebound, because you see a lot of that with good relievers with good stuff. You can be okay with that. So again, I'd make an exception for Romero, but otherwise I'm not trading for another like rental reliever at this point. If you want to go and get Peralta with 2 years, or you want to go and get Nardi or Sisk as a development project, absolutely do it. But even Romero makes me think twice about making a move like that. And you're more likely to find guys that are interesting righty relievers. There's just more of them out there. So maybe you get a righty who has the stuff to get lefties out. That's a possibility instead of getting like a top number 1 lefty. That's something you can do too. But again, Ken Rosenthal reporting, Mike Elias said Saturday, Orioles are still looking at bullpen upgrades, along with the starter, along with the bench bat. This offseason is not done. But I think the way that they've signed Alonso, they've done the Grayson trade, right? They got Kittredge back. They signed a closer, but then they traded for a starting pitcher. Kind of an interesting name in Shane Baz I hadn't even talked about. Like, there's really no predicting what the Orioles are going to do next. The only thing you can confidently predict is they're going to do more, is they're not going to be done with the offseason here in late December. But you don't really know what they're going to do. So even with me trying to predict some other names besides Romero that they've been connected to, that they could go after, who knows? This is a different way that Mike Elias is operating this front office this offseason. It's exciting. It's harder to predict. But whenever they do make that next move, certainly it will be covered right here on the Locked On Orioles podcast. That'll do it for today. We still have 2 more episodes coming up later this week. Most likely, the schedule will be Tuesday and then Friday, with the holiday coming up, 3 episodes per week. This week, we will be planning to do another episode looking deeper, kind of looking from the Rays perspective as well, at the Shane Baz trade from Friday. So make sure to check out that, which is coming up as well. We know the holidays are right around the corner, but if you do need a last-minute holiday gift or someone keeps asking what you want, Make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. You get ad-free episodes of Locked On Orioles. You get exclusive Locked On Orioles Discord server access and more. Those subscriptions can be gifted through lockedonorioles.supercast.com. Again, if you're enjoying the show, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. We are so close to 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube. When we get there, we're going to do a fun Orioles giveaway for subscribers only, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you are a listener, we thank you so much as well. Make sure to subscribe, follow the show. If you could leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps us out as well. And if you have thoughts about the show, you want to ask questions about the Orioles, give me some feedback, you want to talk some ball, you got questions about the Everydayer Club, whatever it is, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Again, we are back tomorrow, but until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.